This special New Year's edition of the Business of Story is brought to you by Wix e-commerce, the professional platform that enables entrepreneurs all over the world to create and run their online store and grow their e-commerce business. Hi, I'm Park Howell, and a Happy New Year. I hope you had a marvelous holiday season. I can't think of a better way to kick off 2022 than with Joseph Templin, author of the fabulous new book that quickly became an Amazon bestseller called Everyday Excellence, a daily guide to growing. To me, Everyday Excellence is like a screenwriter's guide for crafting daily scenes of personal improvement that will add up to an epic life story for the coming year. But even though this is a fun and inspirational read with loads of actionable things you can do each day in the coming year, no one is saying it's going to be easy.
I've got actually two autistic children. And so the one was doing Taekwondo, and his Taekwondo master said, focus and finish, focus and finish. So if an 8-year-old in Taekwondo with ADHD can do this, those of us who are big people, grown-ups, should be able to do it. So for example, if I need to do something at work, like I need to follow up with a half dozen potential clients, I will literally take my phone, take my computer, take the list of what I need, and go into a different office where there's literally nothing to distract me. And I will just focus and do it.
As a reformed physicist, financial planner, startup founder, and autodidactic polymath, which I have no idea what that is, but he describes it as a Swiss Army knife, Joe Templin has invested the past 2.5+ decades to help others reach their financial potential as a planner, trainer, mentor, and creator. Templin is the managing director of the Unique Minds Consulting Group and co-authored Do You Want to Make MDRT or Not? With Dr. John Stolk, as well as Choices, Creating a Financial Services Career. Joe is co-founder and president of the Intro Machine, Inc., an organization dedicated to teaching professionals in a variety of fields how to build an introduction-based business. He has spoken all across the U.S. and Canada on ethical business development. In his free time, Joe enjoys running Ragnar's, a 200-ish mile team relay race, and he runs at ultramarathons and is a champion-level martial artist. So Joe knows a thing or two about discipline and dedication to achieve your goals. He also believes that almost everything is a tale to be told. Sales? Well, getting people literally to buy into your story. Relationships? All about a shared narrative. Our own actions? Reflections on the monologue in our head. Improving ourselves, our vision, and our ability to communicate is the essence of being more excellent every single day. So please welcome to the Business of Story to kick off this new year, Joe Templin. Joe, welcome to the show.
Park, thank you, and Happy New Year, my friend.
Happy New Year to you, too. You are kicking off our shows for 2022, and the reason being is because of this new book that you have out that I want to go into deeper detail on, this Everyday Excellence, which is easy to say but hard to do for most of us, and you are going to give us some tips on how we can create and craft a better personal story arc for this year, and as you said in your notes to me, so that you can share a story you are certainly proud of this time next year. So you ready to dive into all this?
Absolutely. Let's get ready to rock and roll.
All right. My first question for you, I was watching you on a business podcast earlier today, and you said you started college at 13 years old. Is that right?
Yeah, because my parents said that 12 was too young to go away to college. If we had the video going, you could see that I look sort of like Doogie Howser. And my mom, being a former nun and a college professor, was heavily into education. And my father, being the first person from his family to go to college because of an ROTC scholarship, was heavily into education also. So I had great influences early on from my parents that were enforced to my brothers and sisters and I. And my mom's favorite saying was the old Mark Twain saying, never let your school interfere with your education. So we were filled with curiosity from day one and taught to actually explore it. I remember I was like 9 or 10 years old and I told my mom that I wanted to learn everything there was to learn. And she said, well, get to work because it's always expanding. And so my mom realized when we were kids not to send us to our room when we were in trouble because that's where the books were. And so that wasn't a punishment. So she actually put us on the stairs, and that was very difficult for me to just literally sit there and do nothing. To me today, that is still pretty much a punishment to have the inability to do anything.
So, Joe, when you went to college, what at that early Doogie Howser age, what did you study and what did you do after school?
Well, I was already hyper advanced in mathematics and science. So I actually went towards one of my weaknesses, which was writing and communication. And so I studied communication and literature in an attempt to make me more well rounded. And what I was doing is I was attending regular school during the week. I'd be attending college classes on the weekend and during the summers. My parents wanted to attempt to normalize me, and it obviously failed. But I was also doing sports and martial arts, music, in an attempt to become a more complete gem. Because if you look, every one of us is really like a diamond or emerald, whatever you want to look at, and we have all sorts of different facets. And so, one of the things that we need to do as human beings is to make sure that we are making ourselves better and more attractive personally and to others on all facets of our life if possible.
So, where did you go to school? And when you graduated, what kind of work did you do? And at what age? Because you must have gotten into the workforce at a quite young age.
Well, I've always worked. I mean, I grew up on a farm, so if you don't work, you don't eat, and I like to eat. So I learned how to have a great work ethic, which is one of the biggest and best gifts my parents gave me that I carry to this day. But I was going to school and all that. And then when I finished up at the Hopkins program, I then went to RPI, which is the oldest engineering school in the English speaking world. And I went into applied physics. So I went from being a book nerd studying Shakespeare and poetry into hardcore trying to understand the depths of the universe and why things work. And I did that. I started grad school, worked for the Department of Defense doing stuff, and was working towards my PhD in physics when I realized I didn't want to be a physicist anymore. Went into business while finishing things off there, and due to a family tragedy where my godfather died unexpectedly and we lost the family farm, I actually ended up in going into what was my first long-term career was as a financial planner.
An interesting, circuitous route. You grew up this brainiac, it sounds, around math and science and so forth, but you found a weakness in yourself in communication. You go into study communication, become a book nerd, Shakespeare, poetry, and then move over into physics, do your work there, come out, work for the Defense Department, and now you're in finance. That is a really interesting. So, is this, would you go back and say this is all about your curiosity?
It's all about my curiosity, but if you look for some of the underlying theme is really trying to understand and help others improve. So, as a physicist, I was a teaching assistant and I was a research assistant. And so it was all about trying to understand how the universe works, specifically around lasers and optical engineering was my focus, but then teaching it to others so that they could have a better understanding. Because, like, my fascination with physics and specifically optics started when I was a little kid with a magnifying glass looking at bugs, and then starting fires from. Then Star Wars came out, and I fell in love with lasers, and so that pushed me on that career. Finance, I was taking those concepts of understanding the rules and teaching them to others. Because if you go to college, they're not going to give you a class on personal finance, on how to budget, on what disability insurance is, on how to save for retirement, on how to do goal planning. That is not taught in basically any college around the world. And so I looked and saw that there was a need in that. And I specifically built my business around that. And I started teaching it, which helped my communication skills. And then eventually I wrote in that space, which brought me back somewhat full circle into writing and consulting. So I was teaching others around that. That led me to further explore psychology and various other things that I have now pulled those on in as additional themes into my story arc as to how I can turn around and help others. But it's all about trying to understand and then teach and allow others to maximize themselves so that they can write their own stories at a much higher level.
Okay, so let's kick this off then, because there's three main segments that I want to cover with you today. I'm almost like three acts, and these were of your own prompting. I'm very curious about your new book coming out and how we can all experience this everyday excellence, even given how difficult it is. So number one, you are going to help our listeners understand their RAS, and I don't even know what that means, and how to program their brain to see beauty, opportunity, and positive symbolism. Can you take us through that?
Sure. Okay. So if anybody has listened to Tony Robbins or paid attention to that sort of space, they've probably heard about the RAS, which is the Reticular Activation System. One way of looking at it is that our brain is hardware, which is the brain itself, and there is software in there, which is how we process the universe around us. And 10,000 years ago, when we had to worry about saber-toothed tigers jumping out and eating us, we were programmed to look for movement, to be anxious, because if you weren't anxious, you would get eaten and die, which was on the list of bad things, and to focus like that. And over time, as society has evolved, we've still kept a lot of that brain function, that filter, because we are exposed to so many stimuli constantly. And what the reticular activation system is as I said, a filter that allows us to try and find the signal in the noise, to see the world. So if somebody has a very negative attitude, where it's from trauma when they were growing up, where it's because they are coming out of a bad relationship and they're just very negative, whether it's biochemical for some reason, they will look at the world through dark glasses, basically, and everything's dark and gloomy and things like that. Or you can program your brain to look through at the world through rose tinted glasses, where you're seeing happiness, where you're seeing opportunity, where you notice the rainbow and not the rain, where you find the pot of gold at the end and you don't worry quite as much about how difficult the journey was. And so the reticular activation system is literally how we see the world, because the world merely is. It is our interpretation. We see the world not as it is, but as we are. And so by changing the way that we look at the world, by programming our brains slightly differently, working with our reticular activation system, we can turn around and see more opportunities. There's a reason why a fifth time entrepreneur sees more opportunities and does things better. It's not just because of their experience, because they're looking for where others have missed a chance to do something. It's the reason why a martial artist can see an opportunity to strike an opponent, and based on better training, they can see more of this. This is the reason why a painter can look at a flower and see the entire universe in there and reveal it through their medium. And we as individuals can continuously work on our reticular activation system. The average human being has between 40 and 80,000 thoughts a day, and roughly 75% of them are negative. That's a lot of negative thoughts. By making some micro decisions and changing some of those, by influencing our environment to then influence us, we change our perception. We program that reticular activation system. We literally alter the filter and are able to see the universe in a slightly different way and impact it differently. So for your clients who are in business, they all have a story that they're telling themselves. They can change the narrative a little bit by changing how they look at the world. And one of the ways that you do that is influence your thoughts starting early in the day and compounding from that point.
Yeah, it's interesting, Joe. I always picture the brain, literally that organ sitting up there as the hardware, as you described it. And I think of stories as the software that drives the brain. And you can tell yourself a negative story and then live that, dark day, or you can turn it and tell yourself a positive story. And yet, sometimes when I talk about this with people, they say, well, you're living with rose colored glasses. You're just ignoring the obvious. You're ignoring the problem that you're trying to deal with. And I quite often will say, well, I could really embrace that problem in a negative way. And it seems like I'm burning way more energy to try to fix it versus embracing that problem with a positive mindset. You know what? There's two sides to each coin. There's two sides to every problem. There's the dark side, and then there's the bright opportunity side. It takes work, though, doesn't it? Because our brains seem like with that negativity bias, we are automatically going to go to that dark side unless we know the jujitsu of embracing what could be the potential bright side of that problem, living into that story and moving forward on that journey.
Yeah, I actually refer to it more as a keto because you're redirecting the energy, but it is changing how you perceive it and redirecting it. So there's an old saying from the Stoics, the obstacle is the way. In fact, Ryan Holiday wrote an entire book around this concept about looking at it in that sort of manner. And the Stockdale Paradox has been famous since the 1960s, where it comes down to embrace the bitter truth, but never give up hope. You can say, the world sucks and I'm going to stay in bed and eat Cheetos. Or you can say, you know what? The world sucks, but I'm going to get out of bed and do a little bit to make my world slightly better. And it's those micro decisions that, when made over a day, week, month, year, compound and create a huge divergence between the paths that people can be on. Just like if you send a rocket ship to the moon, you don't need to make radical alterations. You just point in the general direction, and then they use micro thrusters to slightly change it because it is changing over a long, long distance. A tiny percentage alteration in that path creates a huge difference in the outcome. So, how do we, on a daily basis, change our path? And that's one of the things that everyday excellence is meant to do. Is it's really a multivitamin for life and allows us to be able to work on various dimensions, whether it's our personal relationships, our health, our mindset, our uh, how we interact with our bosses, all these different areas. If we can make tiny little changes on a daily basis in these things, at the end of a week, we're making progress. At the end of the month, we can see it. At the end of the year, we are almost unrecognizable to where we were before if we do those daily little tiny different things. And that's partly going back to the reticular activation system because it becomes easier and easier to do. But it comes down to your focus. As Winston Churchill said, history is going to be kind to me because I intend to write it. If you intend to write a great story and you set out about that, you're going to have obstacles just like everybody else. In fact, the greater the story you're trying to create, the greater the obstacles that you're going to have to overcome. But it is having the proper mindset is one of the biggest hurdles and advantages when trying to tell the story of your future. I mean, Jordan Peterson talks about the future authoring program in a lot of ways, and you focus on what your goals are, and then you figure out the tiny little things that you need to do them, whether it's as little as, okay, I want to improve my health, so I'm going to actually buy running shoes and put them next to my bed and get up in the morning, and I'll just at least put them on and do a little bit. You don't have to do a ton, but just a little bit because that's better than I was before. And David Goggins talks about this. There are so many individuals who are living proof of making those little changes will help you out. And I'm a huge fan of James Clear habit stacking from his book Atomic Habits, where you literally take a habit that you do every single day, like get out of bed. You wake up and you get up, and put one tiny good habit on top of that. And that starts a cascade of positivity and good actions for your day that you can then build off of. Or you can go and have no habits and be living in chaos, which is generally not the right way to go long range.
So what you're saying then, Joe, is a person may be telling themselves that everything's bad around them. This is just the way my brain is, that I am a negative person and I've been my negative person my whole life. And this is just the hand universe has dealt me, versus you can approach life that way, but you can actually change that mindset, that you are not strapped with that negative mindset if you have the mind to do it. You can change from that negative nilly, that victim mentality, in a positivity in abundance, correct?
Absolutely, because as you said, the universe has dealt you a hand. Okay, so you've got those 5 or 7 cards. The question is, what are you going to do with them? Are you going to try and parlay them into some success, or are you just going to sit back and go, oh, this sucks? Oh, this sucks. Because if you just do that, guess what? It is going to suck. But if you say, okay, I've got the potential to succeed because I've got these 2 cards in my hand, I'm going to see what I can do to build off of that. And if it's a long game like canasta or something like that, you're not being made or broken in any one particular round. You have your starting point. How are you going to play it? What are you choosing to do? Because your actions at that moment are under your control. So if you just fold, okay, eventually, if you fold everything, you're just going to lose. But if you say, all right, I'm going to try on this, for example, I got out of bed, it's raining, I don't want to run today. All right, so I'll spend 3 minutes doing some physical activity. I'll do some push-ups, sit-ups, whatever, to just get my body going. Okay, I'm not feeling good this morning, but you know what? I can sit down and I can read. I mean, the average American reads less than 5 books a year. In fact, the average American reads less than 1 regular book per year after they get out of their highest level of education. That is dumbfounding.
Literally dumbfounding.
Yeah. You know, read a book. I don't care if it's Dr. Seuss.
And it's all about learning.
Yeah. And so if you read 1 book per month, you are in the top 10% of American society in terms of learning.
Joe, can you tell me about, real quick, this Stockdale Paradox? I've not heard of that. Can you give me the quick background on that? And I think I get it, what it is, but I'm just fascinated by it since you brought it up earlier.
Sure. So later, Admiral Stockdale was the highest ranking U.S. naval officer in the Hanoi Hilton, where John McCain was, where the prisoners of war were kept and tortured by the North Vietnamese. And he was a stoic practitioner. In fact, when his plane was going down, he said that he is leaving the modern world and entering the world of Epictetus, who had been born a slave back in ancient Rome. And so, being the highest rated ranking individual there, they tried to break him. They tried to manipulate him. They tried to use him. And the immense courage that this man showed and demonstrated was one of the reasons why most of his men ended up surviving. And he tells the story in the book Good to Great by Jim Collins, one of the greatest business books of the past 30 years. And he tells how the people who had just abject hope, they were the ones who actually broke first, because they're like, oh, we'll be home by Christmas. Oh, we'll be home by New Year's. Oh, we'll be home by Valentine's Day. And those dates would come and pass, and they would give up hope and just completely die. The people who actually gave up next were the pessimists, because, oh, this sucks, this is so horrible, blah, blah, blah. And they would go, and eventually their negative attitude would be realized. The people who survived, though, were the ones who embraced the situation, who said that the world is horrible, this is my current situation, but I will get out of here eventually, that I will survive and succeed. And so the Stockdale paradox, when you boil it down, is the world sucks, but I'm not going to give up and I will maintain hope for success. So let's say that you're in business and you lose your biggest client. That sucks. But if you turn around and analyze why you lost them and how to replace them, you can learn from it, come out of it better, and have a stronger company. The world sucks because COVID shut down a ton of things. But what do you learn from it? How do you reapproach it? How do you re-engineer your business to tell a different story from that point forward? It is understanding that not everything is cupcakes and unicorns, that there are horrible things out there. There's bad people, there's disease and all these other things. However, instead of hiding from it, you embrace it and do the best that you can and don't give up hope. As my friends in the military say, embrace the suck.
Embrace the suck. All right. So I want to move on to our next subject here, but I want to first understand your story about the time you died.
Okay, so talk about sucking. That's at the top of the list is when you're actually dead. Speaking from personal experience. So when I was a kid, I was severely asthmatic. And this is in the 70s and 80s. So we didn't have the puffers. We didn't have the medicines that we have these days. I mean, basically, what you had to do was you had to be isolated. You had to literally live in an oxygen tent when you were in these sort of situations. They would try and pump you through full of advanced steroids and other things to knock it out of your system. And so one school year, I think it was second grade, I spent half the year out of school, more than half the year. So I had to learn on my own, and they were actually going to fail me until the national exams came back and I got a perfect score. And they're like, I guess we sort of have to pass this kid. But I was having an asthma attack one day, and my mom brought me to Doc Murray. And, I'm laying there on the table, and all of a sudden I started floating. And I'm up there and I'm looking down, there's the bright light. And as my mom said, Doc Murray turned into an octopus. He had so many arms going so fast. And boom, boom, and, I'm floating and it's bright and all that. And I could breathe easy and, big, deep voice, not your time. Boom, and I'm back down in my body. So, given the fact that that happened, I have a second chance and I'm not wasting it. That's one of the reasons why, as my friends say, I burn the candle at both ends and in the middle with a flamethrower.
And it's interesting to me, number one, that story is amazing. But it also kind of leads to something that you talked about at the beginning of the show, where you felt like you were not a particularly good communicator. So you took that on. You went and built up one of your weaknesses into a great strength now, having written as many books as you've had, and with this new book coming out. And now I'm playing back to being the asthmatic child, which impacts you running around and being an athlete and so forth. Today, you are an awarded martial artist, a marathoner. I mean, you are all about the outdoors and exercise. And is that again because you were trying to play to that weakness and build it into a strength?
In a lot of ways. And as you saw when we first had the video going, I've got my good old Teddy Roosevelt over me. Teddy Roosevelt is remembered as one of the most physically dynamic presidents that we've had, but he was a scrawny asthmatic kid too. And his dad was like, Theodore, you have the mind, but you don't have the body to go with it. And his doctor actually prescribed cigars and whiskey to help overcome his asthma. Now, my doctor did prescribe those, but Theodore Roosevelt went on a pursuit of physical vitality. And this is an individual. People don't realize how educated and intelligent he was. I mean, this man always had a book with him. Even, when he was on San Juan Hill, he had a book in his pocket, in his saddlebag, because in spare moments he would take the time to work on his mind. So this was an incredibly intelligent and insightful individual who also was physically dynamic, and it was the cross pollination between those two components that allowed him to achieve greatness in a lot of ways. And he made himself into that through his will. And so that's why one of the reasons why the martial arts has helped me so much, because if you have the will, you can use your mind to make your body do what you want. And it takes time to build it. You're not going to become a marathoner overnight. But you can get up and get off the couch and go around the block. And then the next week, you're going around the block twice. And then in 2 months, you're doing a 5K. And then another couple of months, you're doing a 10K. And a couple of years later, you do your first marathon. But that's because your will is changing your environment, changing your decisions. And it goes back to that reticular activation system where you start thinking of yourself as a runner and as an athlete because you have made yourself into that.
And that leads to this second major point of this interview, for me anyways, is have techniques to build better habits, to have better days, weeks, and months. So that's what you're talking about right there. Take these little, and it goes back to that. I love that analogy you had of the Saturn V rocket heading to the moon. It has all this muscle to get off and point it in the general direction of where you want to land. But then you have all these little micro moments and thrusters that adjust as you go. So what you're talking about here then with these habits is these micro adjusted habits. Don't try to take on everything in one day. Just do little things every single day to help you get to your preferred destination.
Right. And also, when that thruster is going, I mean, how much energy is it expending to just get off the launching pad? That's the maximum energy exposure. So when you're starting something new, whether it's training in martial arts, whether it's picking up an instrument, whether it's pursuing a degree, whether it's trying to build your business, there's so much energy expended right up front and you feel like nothing's happening. And then it starts to move a little bit, and then it moves a little bit quicker and a little bit quicker. And what happens is the compounding of that consistent energy expenditure, that consistent force that you're applying, is actually translating into velocity. And so you have to keep doing it. A lot of people start going to the gym on January 2nd, and after a week of starting to work out, and they're sore and they're hungry and they're tired and all this, and they're not seeing results, they give up. Don't give up yet. Keep going. The rocket has barely left the launching pad in that situation.
I know you're a big believer in these little index cards that we all, our age grew up with, and you use those as kind of your daily planner and write down 2 or 3 or 4 things you absolutely must get done that day. And then you toss that aside with that feeling of, all right, I got it done. I stayed focused. I mean, to me, that's a simple little habit that anybody could use when they feel like they're procrastinating or can't get to a project, or a week or 10 days have gone by and now they're beating themselves up in that victim mentality of, oh, I haven't done anything about it. That's just one example. Do you have some others that you could share, things, little habit hacks that people could do to make those micro adjustments now?
Sure. So one thing that I found, I've got actually 2 autistic children. And so the one was doing Taekwondo, and his Taekwondo master said, focus and finish, focus and finish. So if an 8-year-old in Taekwondo with ADHD can do this, those of us who are big people, grown-ups, should be able to do it. So for example, if I need to do something at work, like I need to follow up with a half dozen potential clients, I will literally take my phone, take my computer, take the list of what I need, and go into a different office where there's literally nothing to distract me. And I will just focus and do it so that I get that done and I can cross it off the list. If I need to write for a certain amount of time during that day or what have you, I will set an alarm on my phone, which is on do not disturb, so that I can't get phone calls or anything else like that. And I will turn off the internet so I'm not getting incoming emails. And for that 22 minutes that I sit there and I write, I'm sitting there and that's all I'm doing. I will get up, have a cup of coffee, walk around, reset my brain, whatever. But it allows me to say, okay, I will do this small little slice. And once you do the first step, it's so much easier to do more. David Goggins talks about putting on your running shoes and going out and just going around the block, and it turns into a 5-mile run. You just start and then you keep going. And so it's those little things, getting over the activation energy, as it was, getting off the couch to do that first little bit. Because once you start, then what happens is you get some momentum behind you. You start having some velocity, you start moving, and you generally keep going. Even if it's something that you hate to do, once you start doing that task, you're probably going to keep plowing through somewhat until you reach a natural stopping point. And so that's one of the things that I use to help me overcome my own personal inertia, my own laziness at times, to get things done that I need to do, even if I don't want to do them.
Yeah, and I kind of subscribe to the Theodore Roosevelt exercise regime of cigars and whiskey, but after I've accomplished everything in the day. So, and I love this idea of maximum energy exposure. You're so right on it, and I've never thought about it that way, that just to get the project off the ground and going takes all of that energy. But now, if you have a decided game plan and you have the steps to take, in order, and then, like you said, the discipline to focus and finish those little steps, they get easier. Like people will ask me, say, Park, you've got almost 300. Well, this will be show 340. You have 340 hours of interviewing people over 6.5 years. How do you do it? And, the hardest part was getting the doggone podcast off the ground back in 2015. And now it's just, it has a momentum all of its own. And I do the little things every day that I need to do to find great guests like you, and prepare for a show, and then just do it. And it's interesting for me. All right, finally, number 3, you talk about formulating a plan that our listeners can be proud of this time next year when they look back at the story arc their personal narrative took, their career took in 2022. How do you do that? Is there some special technique to this plan?
I subscribe to the Stephen Covey thought on this, which is actually what the quote is for January 1st for the book, is begin with the end in mind. So put yourself in your shoes of a year down the road or 5 years down the road if you're looking at long range plans around a business. What do you want it to be like on the January or December 31st, 2022? How much business did you want to write? How many new clients did you want to acquire? How many movies did you want to go see with your family? How many dates did you want to have with your significant other? Things like that. If those are the goals, that's the end that you have in mind. Now work back from it. Okay. If I want to run a marathon in 8 months, I'm sitting on the couch right now. Well, what do I need to do? Well, I probably need to be able to run a half marathon 6 weeks or 8 weeks before then. Okay. So I put a half marathon on the targets 2 months before the full marathon. Okay. To be able to do that, I need to be able to run a 10K 2 months before that. Okay. So that's 8 weeks out or 12 weeks out from where we are today. I'm still on the couch. How do I get from being on a couch to running a 10K in 8 to 12 weeks? Okay. Is there a plan that I can find online? Is there a book that I can read? Do I need an accountability partner? What do I need to do to have these first steps to get me to that first goal that then can lead me to the second goal and then that third goal? And so that's one of the ways to back on in. If your goal is to do 100 new clients for the year in whatever capacity that you do, what's your plan around it? To get 100 new clients, is it something that I need to put forth a tremendous amount of time and effort up front and then it gets easier, like with that Saturn rocket? Or is it the sort of thing where it's a replicable process? I know my process is 4 weeks long, so I need to input potential new clients into my system now, and they'll come out in 4 weeks. And how many of those do I need each week to be able to feed that machine? If I'm going to write a book for the year, okay, what do I need to do logistically? Do I need to book out an hour every single day? Do I need to have a accountability partner that I'm going to send one chapter to every single month? Because one of my friends just finished her first book doing it that way. So whatever those goals are, one, you need to figure them out. And so that's what New Year's is for sitting down and figuring out what you want to accomplish in the next year, personally, professionally, academically, family wise, health wise, all of it. Figure out these different goals. And then from there, you can backtrack into what do you need to do to accomplish them. And if you're doing those little things on a daily basis, at the end of a week and a month, you're going to see progress, that you're going to see that you're doing the right things. You might not be on track yet, but you can get there. And then you make your little tweaks like with your sound rocker, but you keep expending the energy and keep doing what you need to do on a weekly and daily basis. And at the end of a quarter, at the end of 6 months, at the end of the year, you're like, wow, I did it.
Joe, tell us about Everyday Excellence, your new book out, and how we can use it to help us craft this story arc for 2022.
Well, you got to remember that our story is written every single day. A year is 365 or 366 blank pages. And so every single day we get to write our story and then flip the page and write a new page. And so what Everyday Excellence is designed to be is it's a multivitamin to push us and help us every single day. So what the book does is each day there is a quote from somebody ranging from William Shakespeare to Muhammad Ali. And then there is a discussion around it, a bit of analysis and insight, looking across various dimensions so that we can look at that day and take from it what is important to us, particularly as opposed to somebody else. So going back to that reticular activation system we talked about earlier. And then there's an action item, because all too often everything's theoretical. We think about this, we hear this, it's doing that gets stuff done. And so every day there is then an action item to move the individual along towards their own particular goals that they were establishing, whether it is being nicer to the people around them, where it's having that one conversation that scared them, whether it's making a slightly better decision around food or distractions. So it depends on the individual what they're going to do, because each one of us is telling our own story, but the story arc and what is needed to have an interesting and ultimately great story is very similar in a lot of ways. So, Park, what's your birthday?
It is February 14th, and now that you know it, I expect a card, Joe.
Do you want roses?
No, but I'll take whiskey and cigars.
Okay, you know what? I'm all over that for you. So, for example, February 14th, the quote is, "I didn't need discipline. I loved what I was doing." Arnold Schwarzenegger. If you know the story of Arnold Schwarzenegger and how much he loved lifting weights, how he was so driven that, as he says, he doesn't need discipline because he loved what he was doing and he fell in love with the ultimate goal. And so we talk about, there's some analysis in here talking about doing what you love and loving what you do. And then the action item is make a list of 5 things you love about work and home. Read it several times today and keep it someplace that you will see that list often. So this will help reinforce that positive aspect to your reticular activation system if you realize that you're doing things because you love to do them, or that they're moving you towards something that you love. Muhammad Ali said that he hated every moment of training. But as he said, that he would go through the pain and being a champion would be eternal. I mean, he and Arnold Schwarzenegger actually became friends. And Arnold asked Muhammad Ali how many sit ups he did. And Muhammad Ali said, "I don't know. I don't start counting until it hurts." And he did that because he loved being a champion. And it was enough to motivate him and move him forward. So if you love certain things, like I love eating, I love donuts. I freely admit, I would do almost anything for a Boston cream donut. And so I run so that I can eat donuts. If I don't run, if I don't do my miles, I'm not allowed to have donuts no matter what. And so it is that love that draws me forward to do things. Okay. I love my beer. If I don't do what I'm supposed to do, I do not earn the right for my beer. And so that love powers me to do some of the things that I don't necessarily like as much to get to the point to have that reward. Okay. I love doing things with my kids. So if my kids do what they're supposed to do, like clean their room, like do their homework, like take care of their chores, then we get to go do more fun stuff, and they know it. So they don't like cleaning their room, but they love spending time with me doing fun things. So they trade off the current unpleasantness for something that is that much more enjoyable, that they truly love. And so everyday excellence creates this sort of mini framework for that particular day, where for just one day, anybody can be Superman or Wonder Woman for a single day, but for that one day, they can become better or excellent in this one particular space, and then a different space, and then a different thing. And the compounding effect of all this is at the end of the year, they have a great story to tell.
Joe, this has been just a delight speaking with you today. And what I always like to do when I meet guests, and they're always pretty much for the first time, unless they're a friend of mine coming on the show, as I hear the story told throughout this episode, I kind of look back on the intersections of people's stories and how they manifest themselves today. For me, you're at the intersection, and we're going to look at four corners. We're not just going to look at two roads. You combine your background in physics with philosophy, storytelling, and teaching to bring us this book and the great work you're doing out there. And to me, it's absolutely fascinating because they all play so well together. We are essentially talking about energy, the force of energy through the physics, the mathematics and the physics of maximum energy exposure to get you moving forward, and then doing small energy tweaks to keep you on track, but having that discipline to expend that energy. Your philosophy, the stoicism, I don't know exactly what you buy into, but I hear it in your tone of voice that, we are all energy. So we can change that negative energy in our brain to positive energy, and the output will follow. So that philosophy comes into it. Then your ability to tell these stories and show them in action. So you're not just here making business points, but you're actually demonstrating them, showing up real time in our life. And finally, from what you got from your mother, nun turned college professor, this ability to teach and using your curiosity to show people what you learn about things so you can level them up. And now you've captured it in this new book, Everyday Excellence. Where can we find this book?
The book is now available on Amazon if people want to go there, or they can go to my website, which is everyday-excellence.com. And if they go to the website, if they use the code Business of Story, they get a 10% discount. So a little nice thank you to you and your listeners for allowing me to tell my story to them today.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for that. And thank you for taking the time to be on Business of Story and helping us all kick off our 2022 year and start crafting a more epic story arc for what's ahead of us the next 12 months. I really appreciate you being here.
Park, thank you. This has been my pleasure.
And thank you all for listening to this edition. Hey, if you've got a family member, a brother, a sister, you got a parent, you got a colleague, you got a neighbor next door, you got anybody that has been telling you what their plans are for 2022 and making those New Year's resolutions, why don't you share this story with them? Share this show with them because of the stories and because of Joe's new book. I think it would be a huge benefit for them. I know it is going to be for me. I am already applying some of the things Joe has taught me in this interview, and I hope you will too. If I can be of assistance to you in crafting that story through our 3 proven narrative frameworks of the and, but, and therefore, where all true, powerful business story begins, teach you about the 5 primal elements of a short story, an anecdote, if you will, that can make major impact in the telling of it in under 1 minute, or my story cycle system, that 10-step process that will help you with your long-form communications and presentation work, then by all means, come on over to the Business of Story. I've got free tools, tips, techniques there for you, or you can also take advantage of my online course on Thinkific. You'll find that at businessofstory.thinkific.com, the ABTs of selling and more. Join us next Monday when we will have another amazing story artist right here for you like Joe Templin. And until then, remember, more than ever, that the most potent story you will ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. Thanks so much for listening, and Happy New Year.